A plank, dark water below, you know this image. It did not happen, not once, not Golden Age. Not in a single verified Admiralty record. The most famous pirate punishment never existed. What did exist is in the archive. Colonial newspapers printed it while he was still alive. His name was Edward Lowe, and the truth was too dark for adventure stories. Walking the Plank entered popular culture through a specific door. Treasure Island in 1883, Peter Pan in 1904, adventure fiction for boys written by men who had never been near a pirate. Stevenson did not invent the image from nothing. He drew on earlier pirate literature, pamphlets and chapbooks that had been romanticizing the Golden Age since the 1720s. Each retelling smoothed the edges further. In 1837, Charles Elms published the pirate's own book, the text that first popularized the image. The Golden Age had been over a century. Elms was not reporting, he was inventing. The Admiralty records from the actual Golden Age document what pirates did to prisoners in specific detail. Walking the Plank does not appear, not once. What does appear is something else entirely. The real Golden Age of Piracy ran from roughly 1696 to 1726, 30 years. The men who lived it were documented in court records, colonial newspapers, Admiralty dispatches, and survivor accounts. Those documents describe what happened to prisoners on pirate vessels with clinical specificity. The language is formal and bureaucratic. The content is not. Walking the Plank is not in any of them. What pirates actually did to prisoners depended on who the prisoner was, what the captain wanted, and how the capture had gone. Some prisoners were released, some were recruited by force, some were not released. The Sweat prisoners were forced to run continuously around the mainmast, while the crew jabbed them with sail needles and broken glass. It ran until the prisoner collapsed. It is documented in multiple survivor accounts. Marooning, a man was put ashore on a sandbar or uninhabited coast with a pistol containing a single shot. The pistol's purpose was understood by both parties. The documented cases include men who used it. These are the documented punishments. They appear in the archive. They are specific, verified, and attributed to named individuals in named places on named dates. They are not in adventure novels. The question is why? Why did the 19th century replace the documented reality with walking the plank? The answer is in what the documented reality actually looked like, and for that you need Edward Lowe. Edward Lowe, born Westminster 1690, active as a pirate 1721 to 1724, not the most famous name from the Golden Age. The most documented case of what the Golden Age actually produced. Lowe was born into poverty in Westminster, a thief from childhood. He moved to Boston, worked as a rigger, married, had 2 children. His infant son died. His wife died in childbirth. In 1721 in Boston, Lowe shot at his captain over a meal, missed, killed another man. He left the ship with 12 men, took a sloop, and never went back. His career lasted 3 years, from 1722 to 1724. He operated from the Gulf of Honduras to Nova Scotia to the Azores. He captured over 100 vessels. He was not remembered for the captures. June 1722, Lowe's fleet arrived at the Grand Banks off Newfoundland. He captured over a dozen fishing vessels. The Boston Newsletter published the account of what happened to the crews in July 1722. The newspaper accounts described men beaten, whipped, and kept in chains. Philip Ashton, a fisherman taken by Lowe in 1722, later published his account of refusing to sign Lowe's pirate articles. Ashton described being beaten, threatened with death, kept captive for months. He escaped in May 1723 in Honduras. His published account is a primary document of what Lowe actually did. Johnson wrote of Lowe in 1724, "None of the English name came up to this in barbarity. Their mirth and anger both were gratified with the cries of prisoners." 1723, Lowe's fleet was operating across the Atlantic, the Azores, the Cape Verde Islands, the American coast. Colonial governors in Boston and New York had posted rewards. The Admiralty had issued a bounty of £100. January 1723, Lowe captured a Portuguese vessel. The captain had hung a bag containing 11,000 gold coins out of the cabin window and dropped it into the sea when he saw Lowe's ships approaching. What Lowe did in response is documented in an official report from Governor Hart to London, dated 25 March 1724, based on eyewitness testimony submitted to the Admiralty. Lowe cut off the captain's lips, he cooked them, he forced the captain to eat them, then he murdered the entire crew, 32 men. The report is in the Admiralty archive. This is not legend, not folklore. This is a sworn eyewitness account submitted to the English government by a colonial governor. It is the official record. The Boston and New York newspapers were publishing Low's atrocities as they happened. From 1722 through 1723, colonial readers could not open a paper without finding another account. The violence was reported in lurid detail. These readers were not distant from the events. Low was operating off their coastline. The fishermen he captured were their neighbors. The accounts were specific: names, dates, vessels, what was done to the crew. Johnson's 1724 general history included Low's story in full. The atrocities were not softened. They were the story. The reader was not supposed to admire him. June 1723, HMS Greyhound engaged Low's fleet off Long Island. Low's consort ship, the Ranger, was captured. Low himself escaped in the Fancy with a small crew. The naval noose was tightening. After the Greyhound engagement, Low's operation was reduced. He continued raiding through 1723 into 1724, the Azores, Portuguese shipping, but the scale was diminishing. The crews were smaller. The captures fewer. Then the end came from inside. Low murdered his sleeping quartermaster during an argument. The crew put him in a small boat with 2 loyal men and set him adrift. A French vessel reportedly picked him up. According to one account, he was taken to Martinique, tried, and hanged. This has not been confirmed. His fate is genuinely unknown. Edward Low vanished from the historical record in 1724, not famous enough for a cage at Tilbury, not strategic enough for a naval manhunt. He was simply gone. The archive closes and does not reopen. He was not the Golden Age's most successful pirate, not its most famous, not its most strategic. He was its most documented case of what the reality behind the romance actually looked like. Why did the 19th century invent walking the plank? Because the documented reality was Edward Low, and Edward Low could not be put in an adventure novel. The 19th century that invented walking the plank was not being careless, it was being deliberate. Victorian Britain was the world's dominant maritime empire. It needed a usable past. A usable past meant a romanticized past. Pirates who walked people off planks were theatrical and clean. Pirates who cut off lips and forced captains to eat them were not available for children's adventure stories. The same era that produced Treasure Island also produced the height of British naval power. Maritime adventure needed heroes. The Golden Age provided the raw material. The 19th century did the editing. Walking the plank is elegant and dramatic. It gives the prisoner time for a last speech. It is completely invented. It replaced something that was none of those things. The documented Golden Age was not elegant. The men who survived longest were often the ones most willing to do what the archive records. Low was the extreme end of a spectrum. Edward Low was not an exception. His documented behavior was unusual in its scale, but not in its kind. The Admiralty records show cruelty across the Golden Age. Low's was the most detailed. The men who turned pirate were not romantic rebels. Most were former sailors driven by unemployment, hunger, or conditions on legitimate ships, documented to be as brutal as anything on a pirate vessel. The flogging, the starvation rations, the press gangs, the months without pay, all documented. Men turned pirate because the alternative was a different brutality with legal sanction. The pirate articles that some crews operated under were genuinely democratic: equal shares, compensation for injury, elected officers. Bartholomew Roberts' articles are documented and specific. That part of the story is real. Nassau at its peak had functioning governance. Pirates elected captains. They voted on whether to attack specific targets. The Nassau Republic was not a fantasy. It was a documented alternative political structure. Both things are true simultaneously: the democratic articles and the documented atrocities, the political philosophy and Edward Low. The 19th century took one and buried the other. Walking the plank buried the other. Every generation since 1883 has learned the walking the plank version first. Children read it before they could read the archive. The image arrived before the evidence. That is how myths work. The myth is now 300 years old in one form and 140 years old in its walking the plank version. It has been in more films than any historian can count. 2 documents: Governor Hart's report to the Admiralty, 1724, Treasure Island, 1883. One was written by a government official based on sworn eyewitness testimony. One was written by a Scottish author for young readers. The Hart Report has been in the Admiralty archive since 1724. The 19th century writers who built the romantic version chose not to use it, or looked and chose not to. This is not an argument that the Golden Age was only Edward Lowe. It is an argument that it was also Edward Lowe. The myth made that impossible to see. The archive is still there, the Hart Report, the colonial newspapers from 1722 and 1723, the documented cruelty, all still there, available, waiting. The plank is still in every pirate film, still in children's books, still the first image most people think of when they think of pirate punishments. The Golden Age of Piracy produced some of the most documented and most misrepresented history of the early modern period. The archive is extensive. The popular version is a selective reading of it. The men who ended the Golden Age did not make pirates walk planks. They hanged them at execution dock, caged their bodies in iron, displayed them at the Thames mouth. Woodes Rogers ended the Nassau Republic in 1718 with a combination of amnesty and naval force. The pirates who refused the amnesty were hunted down. The Republic was dismantled by institutional power, not adventure. The largest pirate trial of the Golden Age, 52 men at Cape Coast Castle in 1722, was a legal proceeding under the Piracy Act with the full weight of imperial law. The documented Golden Age is more interesting than the Romantic version, more complex, more politically significant, more human. It does not need the plank, it has the archive. Edward Lowe was the Golden Age's least romantic figure. No political philosophy, no legendary ship, just the archive, specific, dated, submitted to government, sitting in a London library for 3 centuries. His story was told accurately while he was still alive. The Boston and New York newspapers did not soften it. The colonial readers who lived near his hunting grounds did not need it softened. The softening happened later, when the people who lived through the era were gone, when the archive was buried under a century of romantic fiction. The ocean does not care which version gets told. It took the same men either way, the ones who walked planks in fiction and the ones whose lips were cut off in the archive. The full record is available. It has always been available. The choice to use the romantic version was made by specific people at a specific time for specific reasons. The physical legacy of the Golden Age is still coming out of the sea. Mogul silver coins in New England soil, Spanish pieces of 8 on the Florida coast. The ocean gives things back slowly. The documented truth is still there, in the archive, in the colonial newspapers, in Governor Hart's report. It has been there since 1724. The plank still exists, in films, novels, children's books. The first image that forms when most people hear the words Golden Age of Piracy. The archive has not replaced it. Governor Hart's report has been in the Admiralty archive since 1724. The plank entered popular culture in 1837. The report is 113 years older than the myth it preceded. The men of the Golden Age did not end on planks. They ended at execution dock, in battle, in Spanish prisons, or marooned with a single pistol shot. Edward Lowe ended in a small boat on the Atlantic in 1724, or on a gallows in Martinique. The record stops. The myth that replaced him is still running. He captured over 100 vessels in 3 years. He was in every major colonial newspaper. He was documented in sworn testimony submitted to the English government. He was the Golden Age without the romance. The archive preserves him exactly as he was, not a hero, not a romantic rebel, the version the 19th century needed to replace. The plank is a clean image. The lips and the cooked flesh and the 32 dead are not. The 19th century understood this. That choice is still visible in every pirate film. The ocean held all of it, the treasure and the atrocities, the democratic articles and Edward Lowe, the men in fiction and the men in the archive exactly as they were. The plank is still there, in 1,000 films, in children's books printed this year. The archive is also still there. Both of them have been there for 300 years. The ocean kept the truth. The adventure novel kept the plank. One of them is still in print. The other is in the Admiralty archive. The one in the archive is more interesting.